This is the Powered Up Podcast, show number lucky 13.
So we went to tons of Mexican restaurants and a little Mexican grocery store. And I said, you have to only speak in Spanish. You have to converse with employees. You have to buy, whatever foods you want to try. I had to write an essay about it too, because I wanted them to see well, this is our tiny little safe community. There are people in our community that I want you to be able to converse with the language.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Gracias, amigos. This is Ken Ehrman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my co-host, as always, Mr. Matt, the Matador Rogers. Matt, what is going on?
Well, after an introduction like that, I am feeling festive and ready to go, I would say. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. It's that time of year where you realize the month of March and most of April, you don't really have much of a break from school. So craving those couple days off that you can get. So for you, Matt, what are your strategies in this everlasting long month of March that we experience every year?
So I think it's a really good question. It's a tough time of year because not only do people act stressed, but they just admit this feeling of stress. I just find myself sweating all the time. And I think you're realizing, oh my gosh, I'm either on track, which never happens, or I'm way behind. I'm in a tough situation. We moved math curriculums, and I'm really just starting to touch fractions and haven't talked about decimals, haven't talked about geometry. And you're just like, how am I going to get it all done and do it in a meaningful way? And I feel like what I taught so far was a good use of the time, but there's just always too much to do. So I think that's the hardest question of how do you use this time? What level of test taking strategies that we do? And I know I was saying this to my principal recently. Our fourth graders didn't take the third grade PSSAs, our state standardized test. And that's usually their gateway. That's their first time taking a standardized test. The questions are in the booklets, and then they graduate to fourth grade where they have an answer booklet and a test booklet, the answer booklet with all the Scantron bubble sheets. And my kids have never filled in a single bubble at that point, let alone manage two different items. So I think, honestly, at this time, I'm going to end up having to do the unfortunate, not necessarily teach to the test, but work on some test-taking strategies heavily because of how last year went.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I would, when I was teaching fifth grade, it was similar feelings at this time of year. And it wasn't necessarily, the way I would spin it with the kids is we're not doing these activities so that you score better on the test. We're doing these activities so that I'm putting you in the best situation to score as well as you can. And I would tell them, are your scores going to make or break your life? Absolutely not. Should you do as best as you can? Of course you should. Regardless of whether you do that or not, you have to take the test. So why not do your best? Why not give it your best effort? So when we're looking at test examples and question examples from the test, what I would say to them is, listen, we're going to look at this because these are different than the questions I'm typically asking you in a school day. And if I don't expose you to these types of questions, whether it be multiple choice or just the fact that it has three parts, whatever the case is, I'm doing this to prepare you for the situation. Filling out bubbles. That is something that I made sure they did a couple times throughout the year on different tests, because they just have to understand that they have to fill in the whole bubble. If you don't teach them that, you just crippled them they could get every question right and not score that because they didn't realize that they have to fill in all the bubbles. Simple things like that. I don't think you're teaching to the test. I think you are preparing the students for the situation or the opportunity that is in front of them. And that's no different than a coach, taking the time to take their kids to a turf field because their upcoming game is on turf and they've never played on turf before. You're just preparing them for a different situation. And I think it's very realistic and important for you to do that to put them in the best situation possible.
Well, I think that's the key. I think our classrooms, and what's been beautiful about the Powered Up podcast since it's really started, is it's a collection of people that ask questions that are usually not on the test. They're higher level thinking, they're deep. And so sometimes my kids struggle with the explicit questioning. They're putting themselves in the emotions of the character, and the question just asked what color dress that person was wearing. And they're like, I'm not used to those type questions. And so sometimes they overthink it, and I think that's an important distinction as well. But honestly, what I've always noticed, I'm not worried about not teaching geometry or measurement or any of these items because, to be honest, my kids are going to have the influence or interest to do as best as they can, and they will use context clues way better than if I solved every single math problem. And them using those context clues to try and piece together answers, they're going to have more success anyway. So, no sweat. Nothing to worry about.
Yep. Not to spend too much time on this topic of standardized testing, but it is a natural and important topic in education. I've always been a firm believer of great teaching and more importantly, great learning experiences will put the students in the best position to score well. Not that should be your reason for creating great learning experiences, but if you are doing that, the kids will score better than if they are exposed to mediocre, I'll say, teaching experiences where they're just consuming content. However, that time where you are leading up to the test, where you're doing, in quotes, test prep, you're not going to raise their scores. You're just, like I said, getting them comfortable with the format, the bubbles, the types of questions. Make sure you turn the page and you check that there's nothing on the little things like that. I've seen kids not do an entire page of the open-ended math. I can't say anything.
You can't do anything.
They're going to score lower purely because they didn't do that, not because of their knowledge level. So our guest tonight, we don't talk at all about state standardized
Total
testing,
shift.
but Total Shift. She is a fantastic Spanish teacher out of Nashville, Laura Boyd. And she brings it. She gives us so many great simple lesson ideas, big ideas to think about, real world application that she's bringing into her Spanish class. Matt, what are your thoughts before we jump in?
Well, I think one of the things that Ken and I, before recording the intro, talked about is it seems so simple as she says it, but it totally shifts your perspective. And there's just a lot of little nuggets in there that she kind of has some relatable teaching upbringings, but also some special experiences. Teach for America you'll hear about, which is really neat. But realistically, she's kind of honing her craft. And I think we've been fortunate to have some incredible educators that have been doing incredible education for quite a bit of time. And she's one that kind of admitted that, like, I made this shift recently and it was awesome. And I'm always kind of trying to reach out and feel how I can support others and gather new ideas. It's just really cool to be in a conversation with someone that feels very equivalent, but she's obviously doing an unbelievable job in her classroom and really deserves all the praise and the attention she gets.
Absolutely. Her students are very, very fortunate to have her. I felt very centered after the conversation with her. There are times that I miss being in the classroom. I thoroughly enjoy being an instructional coach, but I really wish I was teaching my own class tomorrow because there was just so many little ideas that I'd love to implement tomorrow. So without any further delay, let's jump into that interview with Laura Boyd. Hi, Laura. Welcome to the podcast. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great.
All right. We are real excited to have you here. So why don't you just start off by introducing yourself, where you're from, where you're teaching out of, and kind of just kind of an overall snapshot of what your career has looked like thus far in education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura, and I currently teach middle school Spanish in Franklin, Tennessee. I started teaching a part of Teach for America in Memphis, Tennessee at the high school level. I graduated from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville with my master's degree, and I love what I do. I enjoy middle school so much.
So before we were recording, we were just catching up a bit and learning a little bit about each other. And you were saying that you love teaching middle school. I talked about how I taught fifth grade, and you used to teach high school, but now you're telling me that you actually think you like the fifth graders the most. Not to compare them, but what is it about that age that you find yourself gravitating towards in terms of enjoying your time with them?
Yeah, so I feel like the fifth graders in particular, they're just so excited to please the teacher, and they're very engaged in everything you do. We have a class stuffed animal and we have a class pet, and they just get very excited. Anything that you want to try, they're just opt to engage with the teacher, and I just feel like the relationships that we've formed this year have been very special. And I think it's just the social emotional connection with the kids because they're transitioning out of elementary school to middle school, so they're like small, big kids, and I've just really enjoyed getting to know them on a personal level.
I think that's my golden time frame. Once they get past fifth grade, I feel like it's a little bit touchy, and it's definitely that age range is for. Teaching in general is for special people, but there's an extra special spot for middle school. I guess talking about the love of language, obviously you have that, and having the ability to share that with these really learners that are learning a lot about themselves and developing in so many ways, it's got to be a really cool opportunity for kids to also expand their knowledge of language and what have you. Can you kind of speak to the beginnings of kids really falling in love with certain items, whether it is language or other hobbies and interests?
Yeah, so in fifth grade, we pilot our world language program. So I think for me, that's an advantage because I get to be the first one teaching them Spanish, or my colleague, he teaches French. So they get very excited and invested because it is something new and it's related arts. And so I can spark their inquiry by just like telling them how I lived abroad, and then showing them how learning another language opens up multiple opportunities. We talk a lot about culture, do very hands-on, fun, low-stress activities just so they can get engaged and feel comfortable with the language. And to see the practical application that they can use, especially Spanish in our country, on an everyday basis. So it's just really powerful to get them at that age because I feel like they're getting excited and they just can start exploring like a different language at that age.
Is it a little bit competitive between you and your French colleague to see who can rope in more students for the following school year?
Perhaps. The kids, they get a little taste of STEM, art, computer, French, and Spanish, and then they can decide in 7th and 8th grade. So I want them to have a pleasant experience with me because I think that's really important to bond with the teacher and feel safe and loved in my classroom. So that's what I aim for. If they want to take me, I'm happy. If not, I'm a little sad, but I respect their decision.
So anytime I've worked with foreign language teachers, I feel like a big topic of conversation, and not in a negative way by any means, is I guess the stress or they feel the need to have a lot of lower level thinking skills in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, with establishing an understanding of the vocab and the word phrases and the word structures and that type of thing. And they see it as a huge challenge to push their students with real world application and higher level thinking skills. And again, this is not knocking any foreign language teacher because frankly, that sounds a million times harder than teaching a kid how to add fractions. But can you speak to, how that looks in your class, or how you're able to kind of push the boundaries a little bit with that type of instruction?
Yeah, so I would say what's been successful for me is my first 2 weeks of teaching, I spend entirely on building relationships and community. So while the Spanish is important to me, I definitely think kids have to feel trust and loved and cared for. They do not want to learn from a teacher they don't like. So I do so much relationship building, getting to know them, call their parents, do learning interest surveys, because I feel like if you just come right off the bat heavy on the grammar language, you're going to lose a lot of kids, me personally, because they've already feeling like this is really rigorous. I'm not feeling cared for. My teacher doesn't know my learning style. So I spend so much time doing that, and I feel like that allows me to get that time back doing the instruction, because the kids, we have a relationship together. They know their peers better, maybe on a more intimate level. So I just very big on building relationships. So then we do take risks together. And it's, definitely at a normal pace. But I think that a lot of the kids feel safe. And so they want to take big risks. And we start reading rigorous text and we start translating. They have to do memorized speeches. But it's really powerful when you see them feel confident in front of their peers, because we've been building this relationship for weeks and weeks and months. And it's not like stand in front of the classroom in front of my teacher. Of course they're nervous because they're middle schoolers, but I feel like the community really comes behind them and we're supportive of one another because of the relationships built. So that's what I think has made me an effective teacher, and it just helps kids take risks because they feel like this is a safe place and I can do that, and if I make mistakes, it's okay.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So you're saying that fifth graders, potentially sixth graders, are coming and being exposed to a variety of different specials, including Spanish and French, and then they specialize. They have the choice to specialize as they go into seventh and eighth grade. I know that, at least in my experience, it was when we got to high school, just pick one, and whatever you're in, you're going to stay in that track. And so we were stuck with whatever teacher we had. I don't want to say that you're selling kids. I know we kind of made a joke about that, but that fifth and sixth grade, you have some leverage to really make the experience as warm and welcoming as possible. And then seventh and eighth grade, I'm sure if they're distinctively choosing you out of other options, that allows you to springboard maybe the difficulty, or like an immersive learning experience where it's more. I know for me, it was my teacher just talked in Spanish and we picked up as many words as we could, and she was just assigned to us. So she didn't have to make us feel welcome and warm and love the language. So is that accurate? And can you kind of speak to the benefit of having that warm-up period going into the years that you would actually study it?
Yeah, so exactly. Fifth and sixth grade, they're just on a rotation for 9 weeks out of all of us. And so they're getting exposure to art, computer, and Spanish and French. And then seventh and eighth grade, they actually will take, if they decide to take the world language for 2 years, and then they get a high school credit, which is also a very good idea, because then for their freshman year, they would be enrolled in Spanish 2 or French 2. And then somewhat of what you were talking about, if they wanted to be done with Spanish for 2 years, and they could go take French or what else the high school offers. So it's also a huge benefit, or if they just want to be done with their language credit. So I think it helps forming relationships, and I've noticed I've taught a lot of their older siblings because I've worked in the district for a while. So that always builds rapport with the families, just having the parents come into the classroom, taking them on field trips. We have a lot of traditions in the classroom. So I think when they hear those testimonies from their older siblings, that gains me leverage, and not all students feel that way. Obviously, I know that, but it's definitely a more rapport when you have them at a younger age versus this is high school and there's 4 Spanish teachers. Here you go.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was the tough part of, you were kind of stuck, and the teacher didn't feel like they did have, it almost felt like, in my experience, she was an expert in the language, not as much the instruction of the language. And so that's really cool. Now, would you say it probably causes you to take instructional risks and really try to tap into just general good teaching practices? What are some of the things that makes maybe your Spanish immersion and language, or just the classroom, regardless of the subject area, what makes your room unique and special and such a warm, inviting place?
Yeah, so from the very first day, I have the kids send me a video how to pronounce their names correctly. And I do this for two reasons. One, I don't want to mispronounce a kid's name the entire year and have no idea. Two, to make them feel a value that their name matters, because there's some difficult names out there. I know that. And I used to be called Lindsay because that's my sister, because we both start with L's. And I used to be like, how do you not know me? Like, I'm not my sister. And I realized, not every kid like thinks that's a big deal. They blow it off. But there are some kids, I thought, you have been going to our school for this long and we've been saying your name incorrectly. That's not okay. So I place so much on the individual child. I call home to all of the parents and introduce myself in the fifth grade very briefly, just to say who I am. I send weekly emails out, tell like a brief synopsis about what we're doing. And then I do a lot of tactile learning. So we do Play-Doh a lot with the language. We do shaving cream, which is super messy, but I like the kids to be kinesthetic and hands-on. I don't want to lecture and just only talk in Spanish where, right, they leave the class and they have no idea what just happened and they're so nervous to talk or mispronounce a word. So I just try to give them like a lot of fun, engaging activities. And then especially this year, like all teachers, I've really honed in on my like educational technology tools, especially for the kids at Zoom. So just integrating Flipgrid was powerful. It's just where they can record themselves talking so I can give them feedback. But I also integrate the gratitude grids. What are you thankful for? What's your one word for 2021? Introduce your family to me. I sent home the Bitmoji of my little self, and it was kind of funny. Again, fifth graders did a lot better with it than eighth grade.
Yeah.
But they took me on the slide. Some of them took me to the pool. It's just about investment for me because you have to have that connection with kids. So I just try to connect with them. I try as many ways as possible because different things connect for different students. So, some thought the Bitmoji was probably ridiculous being 14, which I understand. But if they have shaving cream and they're in 14, you are the coolest person that day. So you just have to find what works for your students.
That's awesome. You just hit us with a lot of awesome stuff, which I love. I would call every family before the school year, so I can connect with you on that one. I do not like making phone calls. I do not like talking to strangers. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. Because half of them end up usually being voicemails. I don't know if you find the same thing. You just leave a, hey, Mr. Ehrman, I'm super excited to work with your son or daughter. If you need anything, I'm always here. I'm always available. Simple as that. Parents love it. Kids love it. Sometimes the kid answers the phone and they get excited. I love what you said about asking them to pronounce their name in a video. And, if you have never heard of Flipgrid or you're using Flipgrid, what a great and easy way to do that. What a great and easy way to start off your class. Because like you said, you could accidentally pronounce somebody's name wrong. And chances are that that child is going to be a little bit too shy to correct you. Especially if they're new to you and they're just a shy person in general. So I really like that. Can you, the shaving cream, because I've done similar activities like that. Can you just paint a little bit of a picture of what that looks like and how you're using it?
Yeah, so first I definitely have them fill out a Google Doc about the expectations because this is middle school and I'm aware. So I have this little Google Doc where they have to sign and fill out the expectations. They're going to clean up their areas. They're not going to throw me any shaving cream or eat it. Just cover my bases. So it's, like, it is fun and they know it's kind of silly, but I'm like still trying to nip everything in the butt so they know like, hey, this is something special we're doing in this class. So once I do that and I talk about the expectations, each child, especially now because we're all so separate in the classroom, they get a bottle and then they make a big mess on their desk, roll up their sleeves. And for example, when I taught the verb tener, they would conjugate using their fingers. And so there's a lot of research on that too when kids write vocabulary, because they're actually having to write in Spanish. And then I just like walk around real fast to make sure that they are, doing what they need to be doing. But I can honestly say I've never had a kid say like, I don't want to do this or this is boring. So the engagement went so high that just like couldn't stop doing it. And I don't do it every day because I want it to be like that. Woo! This is what we're doing. So it's not something habitual, but it's kind of like a reward in a way. If they're doing really well, I'm like, okay. And they ask for it very frequently, but I think it's just something super powerful for all ages. But you have to take a risk as a teacher because it is messy, but learning should be messy.
And it leaves the desk nice and clean. Absolutely. That's another benefit.
That's very true. And like you said, take risks and setting the expectations, that's so important. We had the author of the Kinesthetic Classroom on show 8, I believe, and that was one of the things he made very clear. When you're doing activities like this where students are going to be up and moving, they're using shaving cream like that, just set the expectations. It just you're almost just saying like, listen, I know this is all the stuff that you can do with it. Let's not do that. We're doing this to have fun. We're also doing this to learn. And it just reins everybody in. I like how you do it with a Google Doc. That's a great way. You could even use a Google form where it's 3 questions. They just have to click yes. And if they click no, it kicks them out of the Google form. I've done stuff like that before, just to kind of mess with the kids and make them realize that, we do have to take it seriously. I want to circle back for 1 second because you mentioned about establishing classroom community, but you also mentioned rapport. And so by the time they reach 7th, 8th grade, you've had these students for a couple years. What is the difference, in your opinion, between establishing rapport with the students and establishing classroom community? And can you kind of speak to the similarities or differences there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in my opinion, starting in 5th grade, I'm just establishing community. Like, this is our special classroom. This is our home away from home. This is me, your teacher. A lot of get to know you games because it's the first time I'm meeting them. You know how to pronounce your name. And then I start, like, we do a get to know you game where they write 1 to 10. And then there's comments on the board like wearing sneakers today, likes the color blue, eats chocolate, and they have to go find different people to sign their paper. So I want them to also interact with one another. And again, it's low risk. So a lot of kids I find only talk to, the 2 or 3 kids that they feel comfortable with. So I just trying to get them to work on their social skills, and I participate too. I'm signing signatures. We also do a show and tell, which I know a lot of teachers think is very elementary, but I learned so much about the kids, simple things, funny things, sometimes kind of serious things, because they are proud about what they bring, pictures of pets, stuffed animals, trophies. So it's just like a time to shine on them, and it's all student-centered. I'm not talking at all. I'm literally like calling their name, their own in the classroom. And so by doing the community, I feel like as we transition, if they decide to take the class 7th and 8th grade, then I'm starting to do more, I would say, individualized with like the student learning survey. Then I'm start using the data to collect like from their Quizlet scores, Kahoot scores, because now we're getting stuff for grade 2. So I would say it's getting a little bit more serious. We still do some get to know you games, not as much, just because we've been building that for 2 years. So I feel most of them should feel pretty comfortable. But we do have kids, that come in and out of our district. So I try my best to like make them feel welcome as well to the classroom. And then the rapport with the parents, I would say until this year, of course, I hosted one event every single month. And so the parents would come in to listen to their child's presentation, listen to show and tell. We had these little like markets, and they like created arts and craft things, trinkets, and then in Spanish, and they would have to sell them, and I made fake money. It was super silly. But the kids would invite their grandparents. We had like career day, and a couple of their parents came to talk to us about their career. So I really try to like engage the whole family. And then with a lot of the Flipgrids, they would like introduce their pet to me, their sibling, because I'm seeing them potentially every day for 4 years. So I feel that I get to know them very well by the end of that time.
What an awesome opportunity. As you said, I know that can be overwhelming. Hopefully it's a good relationship, and it seems like you strive to make it as good of a relationship as possible.
Well, and Matt, sorry to cut you off, but for your perspective as a fourth grade teacher, you have the kids 1 year. So you have the task of establishing rapport and community from day one, and you have a 180-day countdown from the moment it starts. So you have to really focus on that and not only build the community as a class, you have all day together, which is an advantage in that sense, and also that rapport. And I was in the same situation when I was teaching fifth grade, and although I wasn't there long, I saw the difference when I transitioned into being a special teacher at the elementary level. And I was with first graders and establishing a community with that group so the students felt comfortable. It was STEM, so the huge focus was communicating, working together, teamwork, problem solving. But I also, about halfway through the year, realized, oh wait, I'm going to see these kids for 4 more years. So all the rapport that I've established is going to be there on day 1 of second grade, let alone, day however many of fifth grade. So, it kind of depends on the atmosphere in which you're teaching and how often you see kids.
Which actually brings up an interesting point of changing school schedule. I don't know if it's the right time to bring that up, but there's a topic being thrown around, and I would hate to actually say that it's going to happen where after standardized testing that you would transition to the next grade level teacher. So before the summer, you actually build up that rapport and then transition, whether it's 2 weeks or a little bit more, you would be exposed to the next grade level. But that's a totally different topic. What I wanted to kind of talk about is you have a unique preparation by going through Teach for America. And I know that Teach for America is an incredible program that gives opportunities and advantages to really highly talented and motivated people to go into, frankly, very tough environments and kind of just putting good people in tough situations can create great situations. And I'm sure you have experiences at the other end. Can you kind of talk about that? That is a huge facet of, I'm sure, the positivity that you have and really your views or your perspective of the value of educators and making a difference in kids' lives.
Yeah, so I really attribute all my success and everything I've ever learned from Teach for America for many points. One, they are so, I guess, intentional in the way that you teach. So when you go through the program, you get coaching, instructional coaching, we went to Georgia Tech and we taught inner city kids in Atlanta, and you're getting coaching on the fly and you're having yourself videotaped and getting critiqued. And so when I taught in Memphis at a charter school, my principal, who was a TFA alum, she just ran the school as a tight ship. And I learned from her, like, lesson planning, organization, have to have a bell ringer, have to have an exit ticket. So she just taught me so much about the instructional practice of teaching. It wasn't necessarily the content that I needed help on, nor was that really her specialty, because she was helping all of us teachers. I was very young, so it's definitely a learning curve, but the leadership opportunities, and especially now, I feel like they taught me so much about involving the community, because honestly in Memphis, I used to go to the kids' homes. They would ride in my car. I went to church with them. It was very like a partnership, like I'm the teacher, this is a family, we're working together. The hours were very long. We had Saturday school, summer school, so much professional development, a lot on culture of the school, of course, and then like the culture of Memphis. So yeah, that was well said. They just like give you so much training and so much support, and they really want to bridge the achievement gap. And I just feel like going through that program, granted my school now is a very different environment, but I take a lot of those, like how I run the class and how I build the relationships, because they give you so many tools, and that's what you need when you're a first year teacher. So I'm just super thankful for them.
Well,
Absolutely.
I think
Sorry, Matt, I just want to clarify one thing for our listeners, especially our pre-service listeners. Is Teach for America something you pursue post graduation? Do you start while you're in your undergraduate? What's the best way to pursue that if you're interested?
Yeah, so I was kind of like a different route because most people they graduate from undergrad and then they're usually delaying like MBA, med school, dental school, working in New York. And so most of the people that were in our core, they call it, were from undergrad and they're majored in business, finance, anything really but teaching. So they're bringing like very high level college students into these intense environments, if I'm being honest. So I was actually already done with graduate school, majored in education. So you still can, and it's different age levels. My course seemed to be just like undergrad. They knew they were going to do this for 2 years, like a commitment back to society. But then I was like, okay, this is terminated. I'm going to follow like my previous path.
Okay. Sorry, Pat. Go ahead.
No, and I think what's really neat, so I have some friends of mine who've gone through Teach for America or programs like City Year, very service oriented, and some fall in love with education. But I think what you were saying is like it's evident that you went into this with an opportunity to go and help really the classrooms that need good quality people as much as possible. And what I was going to comment on is, as you mentioned, it seems like you probably got some of the best feedback you possibly could because not only were you getting from coworkers, which is what we all depend on, whether it's our advisors inside the building, but also having an outside program that if you were invested in being as good as you could, they were probably going to give you good feedback. So I imagine in those early years of education, that is a huge benefit to have kind of not only one sounding board to get all of your influence. Is that something that you felt like was a benefit, overwhelming, maybe a character attack of like, oh no, I'm doing things from poorly and hearing it in every direction? How does that benefit? Because I know first year teaching is one of the hardest experiences for any non-educator to experience, having answers for things you've never thought of.
Yeah, so first year teaching, very difficult. Working in an urban environment also had many challenges coming out of graduate school. So, I was used to going to graduate level classes, having higher level discourses, and then you're working with teenagers. And I was very young too at the time. Obviously, I looked young. So the thing with Teach for America is we would have these trainings before we started the classroom. It's called Institute. That was in the summer prior to your teaching position started. And they're just like all day, every day to the wee hours of the morning. And they really tried to equip you with the resources. And then similar to what you just said, as the year progressed, you had a mentor, and then you would also have some Saturday required trainings to go to. But those were like really helpful if you have the growth mindset. Again, I feel like the people who did the best, if I'm being honest, just had intrinsic motivation, grit. They wanted to be there. I was like, this isn't personal. Like, they're trying to make me better, improve outcomes for kids. It's not always like Laura against them. But sometimes, in the beginning it feels a little personal because they're watching everything you do, the way you walk in the classroom, if your back's to kids. But once I got through that, like 1 minute of it's fine, you're okay. Then I realized like this is really helping me. Like my days are going better. Kids are learning better. The question level is going a lot higher. They taught me, which I'm sure you guys all know this, that you always ask your question first and then you state your student's name. And before I would always say, Laura, question 1. Well, everyone else checks out, right? Because you're not Laura. So I can still apply that. But I did not know that because I just would start calling kids names. So it was just that kind of like in the moment feedback that really, I think, defined my teaching. And it just, they're trying to help and make you better, but you have to be willing to take it and apply.
And then as you mentioned, the curriculum comes second. And I think we've talked to some incredible educators, and the message we keep on hearing is really good people and people that want to be good at what they're doing find a way to do so. And usually it's that passion that comes through. If I have to go, hopefully my principal's not hearing this. If I have to teach kindergarten tomorrow, I will figure out a way to be as good at that as possible. Or if I'm teaching biology in the high school, it's not going to be great, but you figure out a way. I think that's a really important thing. Kind of peeling back towards what you're doing right now. I know Teach for America is an amazing program, but you're still in the classroom as an incredible educator. And I think you have, what I'm interested to hear about is really the love of learning that you get to see in kids through that fifth through eighth grade and how that grows. Because such a beautiful thing like learning a language is got to be incredibly rewarding. What are some of the ways that you see that? And also, you mentioned real world application, creating a store, or a sale, or kind of those type things and showcases. What are other ways that, again, you're applying those skills so kids are really using it and completely benefiting from your instruction? Sorry, that's a lot.
So I would say with 7th and 8th grade, this is their favorite activity, is going on the field trips. So we went to tons of Mexican restaurants and a little Mexican grocery store. And I said, you have to only speak in Spanish. You have to converse with employees. You have to buy, whatever foods you want to try. I had to write an essay about it too, because I wanted them to see well, this is our tiny little safe community. There are people in our community that I want you to be able to converse with the language. And all of the workers, I called them ahead of time, of course, I told them I'm bringing all these teams here just so they didn't feel overwhelmed by me. And they bought stuff, but I wanted them to try new foods. I wanted them to see the language on the wrappers, and I wanted them to see, there was a ton of people there that day anyway, so they were hearing the language. And, they're looking back at me, and I'm like, come on. So I think all of them, even the nervous ones, they thought oh, wow, this is how I can use this in the real world. And then another thing, of course, we're not doing it now. I had a huge partnership with the local nursing home because it was only a mile away, logistics. So I wanted the kids to develop their empathy skills. And so they would go once a month and we would teach them Spanish. And it was just, introducing themselves, singing the alphabet, Feliz Navidad and stuff. But that to me is hey, you have this language, but you need to teach it. And you have to develop empathy with different generation. And it was a dementia unit. So just building communication skills and showing hey, this opens a lot of doors. I tell them that all the time, but I think you really need to present them with the door so they can open it and use the language. The field trips, yeah, that was a big one. I would say the presentations are still powerful, but the more of an audience or the more of authentic experience in a community is way more than I could do.
Well, what I love about that is by taking them to the stores, you're forcing them to step out of their comfort zone, which is a great lesson in of itself for them to experience. But I would guess that it almost helped them realize that they don't have to know the language perfectly to be able to utilize the skills and the vocabulary that they're learning with you to successfully navigate a conversation. Because, and this could just be our case as being, English as our first language. A lot of the world knows English, but might not know it perfectly. But if I know my English, they know a little bit. I know a little bit of Spanish, they know Spanish. We might be able to piece it together. I can remember taking German as a student. I really liked my teacher, but I felt like everything was memorization and it was isolated in our worksheets, in our textbook, in our experiences. My grandmother is from Germany. My dad and my grandmother both speak fluent German. I couldn't communicate with them. I was never put in situations where I had to try to figure out the words they were saying and then try to kind of interpret it a little bit, or at least gain a somewhat of an understanding. We were so focused on verb tense and noun formation, or whatever those concepts are. And I love how you're putting them in that situation, because it's going to give them the confidence to be able to do it. And also, like I said, unless they're going to Spanish 5, they're not going to learn how to speak Spanish fluently, but they can remember those important words, see them in practice, and hopefully hold on to those for the rest of their life. So when they travel to Europe, they know 50 words, and that's 50 more words than most people know.
But honestly, if a 7th and 8th grader is going and having a conversation successfully, broken and haphazard, that's an incredible amount of comfort that solidifies, hey, all the work that I've done while with you, that if they continue to expand, that's incredible to say you're able to converse with a native tongue, hopefully, with someone that you normally would not be able to at a very young age. I think that's wildly cool, just that application. So that's really neat. Because I mean, I didn't start until high school. The fact that you're doing that and then those real conversations. The other thing you mentioned earlier was your actual experiences that you share. And so I'm assuming that you have traveled overseas or have some experiences. How does that affect? We've had someone on who was a history teacher that you could just tell. His name was Rhett, and he was one of our earlier episodes. Show 3, and he just absolutely lived for history. And it seems that, like, in some ways that you take advantage to be as up with it as possible, but also loving what you're doing related to it.
Yeah, so I lived in Costa Rica and I lived in Spain. So I try to share some of the culture, you know, how they give 2 kisses. And then I showed them some throwback pictures of me with like my family that I lived with. And I showed them like how you traveled on a metro because, you know, we're in Nashville, so we don't have all those great things yet. And just like how studying abroad really enhances the learning experience because I want them to have that too. I mean, it doesn't have to be to Spain, of course. So I try to teach them like, hey, having the skill set and then being fully immersed, like it just opens so many doors. And they see me conversing like with a lot of the kids that are bilingual, the custodians, some of the bus drivers. So I try to, you know, model that. Like I'm able to converse with a lot more people and help people out, you know, just in certain daily situations because of the Spanish. So I want them to see like it is culture too and respecting others, even if we have different viewpoints and trying new foods. And we talk a lot about, you know, celebrations and what the clothing looks like and what the school day looks like for somebody in a different country, because I really want them to be global citizens. And so I think, you know, learning a language just empowers you because you have to learn about the culture and the way people interact. So I try to just share that through my own testimony that hopefully it sparks 1 or 2.
That's great. When you, sorry to jump back a little bit, when you take the kids to the stores and the field trips at the restaurants, do you find the next day the buy-in from the students hits a different level? Because I would think it's kind of what Matt was speaking to. It almost solidifies like, hey, you know, Mrs. Boyd, I know what I'm doing. Look how great you just did in that real world experience. It's almost, this is a really lame analogy, but it's almost like Karate Kid. I just watched this with my wife. It's on my mind.
Aww.
Where, you know, he sands the deck for a week. He paints a house. He paints a fence. And he hasn't learned any karate. And then all of a sudden he knows all those skills when he's attacked, and he realized it was muscle memory. So does that kind of like, does it change the game in the classroom when you give them that experience and that confidence booster?
Yes, and it's something also special that we do in Spanish class, and so they know that they can have something to look forward to. I took them to, I think, 4 field trips last year before the school closure, so it just, I think they finally get like, oh wow, everything we've been learning about when we're talking about foods and how to order at a restaurant, like this is real life. And of course the waiters and waitresses, like they don't speak English to them because I tell them not to. So you're right, they have to have grit, and it is jumbly at times, but I think a lot of them, like you can see the little grins on their face and they're working through it, and we practice a lot. But yeah, I think it just is something special. And then my goal is, you know, if they go out with their own family to a restaurant, that they would feel like I'm going to try to order for my family, or I'm going to try to order or connect with the waiter or waitress, because then also the waiter and waitress, you can also see their dispositions. Like, you know, that's exciting for them. They know their kids, so they always like talk slower, help them out. So I think the kids just really enjoy it. They get to get out of the classroom too, which who doesn't love that?
Absolutely. And hey, if the waiter or waitress is on your side, maybe you get a free app, maybe your food comes out a little bit faster. There's always an advantage there.
So the one thing that I wanted to just touch on, the idea of going to the retirement home as well, right? Like, again, this is what we love and what I'm loving, and what is just creating wheels in my head is you're tapping into, again, real world application. You're through the store and through the restaurants and what have you. You're also tapping into maybe a community that doesn't speak Spanish, but that classic, like, you really understand what you're learning if you can teach it by, even in the basic sense, communicating and sharing and teaching. It's just when talking about those higher level thinking questions and the higher order in Salmon model, those type concepts, just in general education, you're applying all those skills and just doing it in such an authentic way that I've got to imagine kids just absolutely love being in your room. That's just the coolest. I don't really have a question. It's just that is just such a unique way of a population that would receive and would love that attention, to really take it out, maybe pressure off the kids. They don't have to be perfect in that situation, which is a huge benefit as well.
Yeah, so I think all of the residents actually weren't bilingual. And again, a lot of them had hard hearing. So it was just so beautiful to watch. And we were coming so frequently. So the whole thing was kind of like to get a buddy. So then each time you were having a relationship. So it didn't feel, because some of the kids do feel a little nervous and a little overwhelmed if they haven't been, around someone a little bit older, a grandparent. I was personally very, very close with my grandpa, so I just wanted to honor him in a way. And I thought the nursing home we go to is a mile away from school, so I wasn't interrupting any other of my colleagues' instructional time. We're using the language, like we sang the song, we did Valentine's Day cookies, we served them dessert. And so each time we had an activity, because that definitely helped, I didn't want them just staring. So, you have to have a task. But they used the language, and I just literally sat back and I was taking pictures of them, but I wanted it to be student centered. And so I organized the event, but I said, once you get there, you got to go up, introduce them, hug on them, bring them a greeting card. They're not here for me. And, the residents loved it. I had a really good relationship with the director of the retirement home, so that was really helpful as well. And my principal was very supportive. But yeah, it was just so special. They'd ask me about them, and then when we found out school closed, we were so sad because we were going to go the next week. So just super powerful to see them blossom in a different way with a different age group sometimes that doesn't always get all the attention.
Absolutely. And what you said about the student-centered component, when you're there, you truly are stepping back, taking pictures, making sure everything's operating well, but you're not working super hard in that moment because you work super hard leading up to that moment. And that's really the key to student-centered learning is creating the organization, creating the plan, putting all the logistics into place so that when you get there, you can step back because it's student-centered. The students need to be at the center of instruction. So I've loved this conversation. This is getting me very excited about our lesson lens. You've thrown a lot of lessons out here, so it's an extra challenge for you because you got to bring something new for this segment. So I'm gonna delay in my introduction of this just a couple more seconds for you in case you used that one up already. But it's the same 6 questions that Matt and I ask each week. It's just for you to paint the picture of a lesson or a unit or a project that you do in your classroom. And so we'll kick things off here. So question number 1 is this a single lesson or is it a long-term project, unit overview? What are we looking at here?
It was a project.
Okay.
All right. So time of year, grade level, I'm assuming the subject is Spanish.
Yes.
But...
So I did this project with 7th and 8th graders, and I believe I did it this fall.
Okay. What are the objectives of the project?
So I decided this year that the kids would have to evaluate and present. So instead of doing like, let's talk about one festival, I had them do would you rather. And so anything they wanted to do. So example, one kid said, would you rather go to the World Cup or would you rather go and do the running of the bulls? And so they had to evaluate and convince the audience, me and the peers, I would rather go to the World Cup because I love Messi, but the running of the bulls, is still cool. And so I really got so much creativity and originality from the kids, because prior I would just say, hey, look up festival. And while the presentations, were factual, I was like, they're not defending their answers. They're not convincing the audience. And I felt like I almost hindered their creativity, because I only gave them 10 festivals. And so you start getting, repeats. And so they just were so creative. I learned about a lot of different festivals I never heard of. And so they had to convince us, I want to go here or I want to do this. And then they also, some of them did would you rather have tamales or churros con chocolate. And so that was kind of fun to see their taste buds, so that was a better project I finally figured out how to do.
That's awesome. So throughout this, if you were to kind of boil down, what are the students actively doing? I assume research skills and preparing the presentation. But if you were to be a student throughout this project, what are some marquee things that they're being expected to do?
Yeah, so first is the research. And so then they're graded on, most of them use Google Slide. They could use a Powtoon if they wanted to, and then they had to narrate over using Screencastify if they were nervous, or they could go live. Also grade them on images that depict the cultural topic that they're talking about, and then the evaluation. So I told them there's no wrong or right answer. If you want to be the running the bulls, that's fine, but you got to have evidence support your text. And so that was a lot of it, and I'm trying better to equip them with more resources when they are presenting, to make eye contact, talk loudly. Granted, we all have the mask on, and then they have to evaluate one another. So they all get a Google form, and they have to be active listen. Because I realized my first year teaching, again, I'd say, okay, time to present, but they weren't evaluating each other or actively listening. They're just, how do I know they're getting it? So they take notes I like this person's presentation, and they're very honest with their feedback, which I so appreciate. And they learn, I feel like they learn a lot more because they're having to take notes. And then I share the comments with the presenter, and they write very thoughtful things like, good job, great job, your font was the wrong color. And I'm like, that's honest, So I think sometimes it's more meaningful, maybe if it's from the peers, so they don't feel like my teacher's grading down on me, but just active listening. And they did a beautiful job, but I had to have higher expectations for them, and I had to actually plan better. So I own that, because I could tell the presentations were so much better because I made them pick something that was important to them, then here's 10 things, and that just hinders creativity.
That's great. So when the students are actively working in the classroom throughout the process of the project, what would you describe as your role during that time?
Yeah, so I walk around and I do individual one-on-one check-ins with them. And, some kids are more dependent and want you to look at it rarely. Other kids want you to look at every single thing. So you just kind of, again, if you have the relationships, hey, I need to check in with this kid every day to make sure he's on the right tab and whatnot. Other kids, had some kids turned it in one day. Was very proud of, but I was like, okay, great job, so you just kind of have to know the kids. But I try to, especially in the 8th grade, a little bit more hands off, because I want them to be more prepared for high school, because if they don't have a teacher like me that's checking everything and feedback, when the deadline comes, you have to meet the expectations. So I try to still give feedback, but I'm not as many reminders and sending out another email in Google Classroom. I'm like, this is the date you got between now and then. If you want a conference with me, that's fine. If not, then I'm just going to accept it. So, you're training them too. So by 8th grade, it's less and less I would say hands-on for me helping them.
That makes sense. So as this project grows and develops, as it seems like you've been making adjustments as you teach it, Do you have a goal of how this lesson could continue to grow, or maybe an end result further, or even just adjustments from how you taught it recently that you'd like to change for the next time you would teach it?
I probably would ask ahead of time to see what they were working on, because I could tell some waited till probably closer to the deadline, just a lot of different levels. And so I probably could have been more organized and said, you need to like submit to me your 2 topics. I would be fine with whatever they picked, but just so make sure we wouldn't have any of the same, just in case, and that their mind was starting to think about the project. And then obviously if they did food, I would want them to bring something in, so it would be like way more enhancing. And then I would have the audience. I would want to bring their parents back in the classroom and invite other faculty members, because I notice as soon as someone comes in the room, I think that just like bumps up. They want to perform better. They're just used to me, which is good, but I think it would be good if they had an audience.
Absolutely. I actually just worked with a teacher who always did a debate, and because of hybrid schedule and stuff, it wasn't going to work exactly as he used to. He used to have a jury be some of the students in the class. And this year we came up with the idea to switch it to some administrators and teachers that came in as the jury members. And it brought a different feel. The kids you could tell that they were nervous and excited. Like at one point it was our superintendent, assistant superintendent, principal, guidance counselors. It's almost more of that real world application piece like you've talked about many times. And something to possibly consider with, like you said about the students and the deadlines and checking in. When towards the end of my time in 5th grade, when I was doing long-term projects, I would have the students create a plan of how they're going to complete a project on time. And I would tell them, look at how many days there are and be honest with yourself. Like if you have to do some work at home, X out the nights that you have sports, X out the nights that you have, piano lessons. Don't say you're going to work that night. You're not going to. So then look at what nights do you have? What are you going to do each time? So then when I would check in with them, I could simply say, hey, show me your plan. Are you meeting your plan? Are you behind? Are you ahead? And so then it was a adjustment. I need to work harder. I actually don't need to work harder. I'm ahead of where I thought I would be. So just different pieces there. I love the spin you put on that project. I love how you really just asked a different question and didn't change the objectives at all. And it just totally raised the level of creativity. That's really cool. So many teachers are going to be able to apply that. Matt, I'm going to put you on the spot. Activity you do with your kids. How can you just change the perspective or maybe do a comparison like Laura did to hopefully inspire more creativity like she did?
So right now we're doing, in 4th grade, we're doing ecosystems, and as a jigsaw, like the classic, everyone does one and you don't listen to your classmates teach you about the other ones. That's our constant challenge, but we're doing biomes right now. And I think it would be really interesting, almost using that same technique of here, take an animal from each of these biomes, which biome would that animal survive in longer? So you have a rattlesnake and a polar bear, and you swap environments, which has a better chance of surviving. Almost that like Who Would Win books, the series. So interesting thought. Maybe I'll have to check that out tomorrow.
That would be cool. That would be a lot of higher level thinking and inferences, and it might not be completely factual because they both wouldn't survive.
Yeah.
But you could even do take this one animal and rank the 7 biomes. Which one would it, 6 other than the one it lives in, which one would it live in the longest to the shortest? So that would really require them to understand the characteristics and the climate of that biome to be able to evaluate how long would it last in each one.
I'm looking for the water environment, the kids just having a very easy one, but
Yes.
Yep. All right, so we are going to transition into the last section of our show called the exit ticket. 4 questions that Matt and I ask all of our guests every week. So question number 1 is, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
It's a tough one.
For me, it's pronouncing their name correctly and making sure I sidebar conversation and say, is your name Miguel? And they say, or if I said it wrong, and then I just honestly own up to it as a woman and say, can you tell me again, like if I'm pronouncing it? So it's very simple, and I think it gets overlooked, but for me, I think that would make a kid feel safe and valued, even if their name is like Laura. But hey, my teacher wants to know if that's my name. And last names, we have a lot of hard last names too, being honest. So just, hey, can you help me?
Well, and I'm guilty, of this myself. Not when you're meeting everybody on the first day of school, taking roll. Jonathan, do you want to be called Jonathan, or do you have a nickname in front of the whole class? It's a little bit embarrassing. And I can even remember my name is Kenneth. And when I was younger, I didn't like Kenneth. All my friends called me Kenny. And I always cringed when I heard that name until I was, maybe 10. Then I realized I didn't care. But, the fact that you have them submit that video, that you talk to them before it's in front of the whole audience of the classroom is so powerful and really important.
And I also think that you're starting instruction expressing care for that child. They talk about even every single day how you greet kids and being able to greet them confidently with a welcome. I think getting that out of the way and feeling comfortable and confident to have that conversation is really cool. The next question is, it could be from a colleague, whether it's pre-service, Teacher America, or even a student. What is the best piece of advice that you've gotten that you constantly have rotating through your head, especially on hard to go to school days?
Yeah, so I had a student, she wrote me a Christmas card, and she said, thank you for being patient and understanding with the class. And I get emotional. I started thinking about it, and Zoom, wouldn't work sometimes, and my Quizlets would bunk. And I thought, those are perfect opportunities for just me to shut my nonverbal expression. I didn't have to say something nasty. I didn't need to add more, the kids know the computer's not working. And I just realized, being patient and, if their mic was not on or if they're on mute, I need to understand I'm the adult. And I think that just, I put it on my desk because, or a tornado drill or something, just, it's education, come on. I just realized, I just take a step back. Everything doesn't need a reply because they're going to look at you, if the computer goes or you forgot to grade their paper, how you're going to react, or if, they're late for class. So I just try to be patient, understanding, because I think it matters more than I realized.
That's great. So the school year goes in waves. There's days of struggle. There's times of years like report cards, conferences that our stress levels as educators are at all-time highs. So what can you say to help a teacher in that moment power up and rise out of that moment of struggle?
Yeah, so one, remember your why, and if that means you visually need to write it down, if you're a journal person or blogger. And I would say just keep the kids in mind. I think a lot of times we get caught up with politics or adults or colleagues or parents, and just try to remember the students first. And this too will pass. I try to remember you can sweat some small things, but know your battles. If the kid doesn't have a pencil, do you want to go there or just give them your pencil? I just say, take my pencil. I don't even think about it. I'm not going to lose sleep, stop my teaching. And some teachers, I feel they stress about so many smaller things. It's maybe you need to let some things go and you'll be happier, because when you're happier, the kids are. So I would say, know your why, fight the battles that you want to fight, and just try to remember student-centered, and don't let things that are out of your control ruin the passion for education.
Way too true. Especially as we're recording this in the end of March.
I need to hear it too.
Yeah.
I'm being honest. I'm talking to myself.
I get it. Your comments ring true. You've shared some awesome things, and I think you have great experiences to continue to share. Going forward, if someone that's listening wants to reach out and hear more from you, are there ways, whether it's website or social media, that people can keep tabs with the really cool things you're doing with your kids?
Of course, you can follow me on Twitter, Technology Laura. I like to provide ed tech and SEL stuff. People email me, I'm fine with that. Anything I can do like to help people and their students, or if they need self-care tips. I like to empower educators to implement SEL because I think it really works, and I'm a testimony of some really good practices, and I just think people should reach out to one another. A lot of those ed tech companies are there to like support teachers and find the people in your building that are positive, and just look inside yourself and it's going to be okay, and just continue to love kids.
Beautifully stated.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Laura. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank
A
you.
lot of insight that you've brought. I think you've painted a great picture of what not only a foreign language classroom can look like, but any classroom in general, with those simple kinesthetic activities paired all the way to the real world application that you brought to us. So I've really enjoyed this. And you can also connect with Laura on our website, powereduup.com. She is a member there. And we're going to keep growing those forums and growing those conversations and networks on that platform. As always, we can be found on all social media at powereduup. So thanks again. This was a blast. And everything that Laura mentioned, some of the activities, websites, tools, and her social media handles will all be listed on our show notes page at powereduup.com/show 12. I had to think about that one for a second. And actually, I'm sorry, show 13. Show 13. And Matt, why don't you take us on out of here?
All right, so as we power down this episode, Laura, you've left us feeling powered up. I'm ready to head right to school.
Yay!
Put some of these strategies to use, those biome activities, maybe bring some Spanish in. But we really appreciate you being here, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Thank you.